This hour, the Kitui Central Member of Parliament is here with us. There's certain things we will be discussing, and as we get into it, want to welcome Mheshimiwa Dr. Makali Mulu. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine. We thank God.
Yes.
For this good morning. It's
Indeed.
a cold morning, but not very cold.
Indeed, we do.
Yes.
We look at your social media, and every other mention that you make is of some biblical reference.
Yes.
Some reference to God. It's interesting that here we are and we're doing that again.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime I go to church, anytime I read the Bible and I get some interesting verse, I keep it somewhere to remember. So that anytime I want to access it, I just go to my Twitter account and I can access it.
Indeed. Oh, that's interesting. It is. And it's also interesting that Member of Parliament, so we're looking at legislative, but you're also an economist. So you understand this money thing, you know, a little bit at least.
Not a little bit. Actually, that's what I've been doing all in my life, except the last 11 years when I've been in Parliament. I'm an economist by training.
Yes.
With 3 degrees in that discipline.
Okay. So then
what was your specialty?
First degree economics, second degree economics, third degree PhD in economics, but more public sector economics.
Okay. So here we are in a space where we're talking about a number of things this morning.
Yes.
From the political, administrative, legislative, in terms of the possibility of extension of presidential term limits, and looking at the cost of living as well. And also asking the question, what is in it for Kenyans? And we're going to get into that this morning.
Yes.
But we want to welcome you properly in a way in which we do on this show.
Thank you.
CT does that by way of our proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the country of Kenya. Now, I have asked our listeners that because I will not tell you which part of Kenya the proverbs come from, as you hear the proverb, try and figure out if you have a similar proverb rather, in whatever part of the country you come from.
I come from.
Or something that has a meaning similar to what it is. That is the proverb of the day. The water of the river flows on without waiting for a thirsty man.
Now, where I come from, we don't have such a proverb.
Okay. What would such a proverb mean to you if you did?
What it means basically is some things will happen whether you are there or you are not there. For example, people will die whether you like it or not. At other times, things will happen because they are beyond your capacity to control them. Because when you talk about the river, you know the water is already flowing. It's either you give way or you swim with the river to the ocean. And swimming might mean even when you are dead.
Yes, it might.
Yes, it might be when you are dead. So it's just at times you have to give way. Simple.
Yes.
Times you have to give way.
Indeed. Or take advantage of a thing when it's right there in front of you, no?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, fantastic, Mheshimiwa. I mean, there's certain things that have been happening in terms of speech, in terms of thoughts over the last couple of days. We've seen it maybe a few months ago, but then we saw it pop up a few days ago. And we're going to have a hybrid conversation this morning about what really is in all of these conversations for Kenyans, coming from a legislative point of view, coming from an economic point of view, and a political point of view as well.
Yeah, sure.
The extension of presidential term limits, we can pretend like it takes us with shock, but the truth of the matter is that it is harbored in the minds of many. I want to get an understanding of where you feel this comes from, and if there's even a possibility of having such a discussion in Kenya today.
Okay, thank you. What has happened is, if you look at the history of this country, the proposal coming from Honorable Senator is not a new proposal. You remember at one point, when the late President Moi was in power, there was also the proposal to make him a life president. So basically, what is happening is that anytime people get into power, there's that remote imagination that you can never leave power. And mostly the people who are close to power, they keep on testing the waters. To find out whether the rest of the country will actually go to their side in terms of supporting that position. And I think that's what I see happening. But as you rightly put it, some of these proposals are very strategic in design. That you want to start with the step one. It's like going up a staircase. That you want to say, let's extend by 2 years. If that is taken up, maybe the next level would be, why don't we make this
10.
a life, not even 10, life now presidency, so that the person in power will just be there up to the end of his life when God decides otherwise. But what people forget, and I think that's what this proposal, that's why you see it has triggered a lot of interest. At one point, I remember, I have been in Parliament for some time. I joined Parliament 2013, and if you look at the 11th Parliament, instead of doing 60 months, which is 5 years, we did about 56. We actually lost about 8 months. And as members of Parliament that time, that was just immediately after the new constitution, we were saying now that we all agree that we need this additional 8 months. Why don't we test the waters and say that we want to extend our term by 8 months so that we push the elections instead of the normal, that time it was March, so the other one was coming in now in August, as in the constitution. So we were saying then, why don't we test the waters and see whether we can push these elections from August to March, where we were elected, because we were elected in March 13th. But now the next one, because the constitution was saying it has to be the second Tuesday of August. So constitutional requirement was that we do it August. So we said, why don't we push to March again so that we serve our full term of 5 years? And I can tell you, all of us as parliamentarians were in agreement that that would be of benefit to us, because anytime we approach elections, we have a lot of fears, you don't know that you'll be re-elected, and then an additional month to your term makes sense. So I can tell you, Kenya just said, oh, no, they could not agree with that. They said, okay, we have elected you, you are our representatives. Some of you have high chances of coming back, but we are saying, no, we don't want. We must go for election. And that's what I see happening. We are now in a country where people are so much informed that majority of the population is in a level of intelligence which is so high that you cannot play tricks on them. And if you want to be safe, is just to do what as the law says. And when you look at what is happening, any extension to the presidential term is a constitutional provision. To make it worse, this is one of the few provisions in the constitution would require a referendum. So what will happen is, if this was even to start, before you get to the end of it, you have to go through a referendum. And I can tell you for sure, the other day I was cracking a joke yesterday saying, if this guy wanted to be very fair to Kenyans, he would actually be saying reduce the term to only 1 year so that we go to elections today. And they can see what Kenyans are thinking about this government. Because for sure people are tired. We interact with people from all over the country, and I can tell you Kenyans are tired. If given a chance to go to elections today, you'll be surprised.
What are they tired of exactly?
The issue, the next topic, cost of living. It has gotten to a level where people have given up. There's a lot of confusion in this country, the way things are being done. You look at all the sectors, the education sector full of confusion, the health sector full of confusion. These are the basic sectors. Water sector, you see what is happening, full of confusion. So when all these basics are everything is confused, you can imagine the level of frustration which our people are in. The other thing, this government has given lots of promises, and when you give such a level of promises, then what happens is, if you can't deliver them, the first people to raise up to say no to it would be the low level, what I call the low level of income Kenyans. So I'm telling you, I wish we went to elections this year, Alexia.
Seriously.
It would be good.
It would. Really quickly.
Quickly. So this senator should be proposing reduce from 7 to 2.
But we can't. One of the things that you've established is that we cannot run away from the fact that there actually is an appetite to extend leadership, to extend the position of leadership, not to extend leadership or good governance,
yes,
but to extend the position. And when we look at that, we mentioned this earlier, when we look at it, we're not looking at what could be the benefits or the merits of that. What we're looking at, and what makes us feel a certain type of way, is that there is an assumption that this person or these persons who would remain in these positions will want to do things that will bring extra benefit to themselves and not the nation. That's why we feel so bad about it.
Yes. But basically the question is, why do we need leaders in our lives? It is which level of leadership? Why do you need a leader in your life? A leader is somebody who should be able, whether you is church leadership, whether it's even family leadership. A leader is somebody who's supposed to have a clear vision. Somebody who should be pushing your life to the positive, not negative. Helping you move from one level of life to the other because of the policies, the programs they will put in place so that they improve your life. So in your situation where you are a leader and then the life of the people you lead does not change at all, it remains the same, or if things work, then they work for the worst, you are not helping them. Then even from where you sit as a person, it's human nature that you might want to be there. But really, the question is, if you're not changing people's life positively, then why do you want to be a leader? And to me, this is now the challenge. Do you go for leadership for selfish interests?
Yes.
Or do you go for leadership to change the lives of the people you are leading?
One would hope that it would be the latter, but we've seen that it is the former.
It is the former. Then the other question is, there's this saying that the leaders you get are as good as the people who elect them. So you've seen a situation where we all say this leader is not helping us, but come every election, they get re-elected. So how do you kind of balance the two? That there is a leader whom, by your standards, when you do your own analysis, objective analysis, when you look at things from even the perspective of the perception issues, people are saying you're not helping us. But come the election day, that leader gets re-elected. And this happens, you look at our parliament.
Our political system is multi-tiered.
It's multi-tiered.
Multi-tiered, the system.
I like that.
And how we elect people is not multi. It's extra multi-tiered. We don't elect people because they're necessarily popular or they have money. No.
You okay?
It is, you could be popular. You could be someone who has development, because the others who are elected and there's no development record at all.
Correct.
But the one thing that ties, the thread that ties these things together is what you call the identity politics that we practice.
Oh yeah, the identity politics.
That trumps everything else. If there is a dominant party in your region and you're in that party, barring a situation where there is a candidate who's genuinely very popular, you will be elected simply because you are in that party.
Then the question is, and I think it's the most now interesting debate.
Yes.
What does that say about the voter?
It says that the voter believes that a strong leadership in the community is the avenue through which they can get the help they think they need. So it isn't an individual. They propel someone to leadership. And even the leadership that is propelled in the community may not make sense to you. Don't try and make sense of it. Just understand that that is the person the community has chosen. And that person will head a political party. Now, that political party is what they believe. Now, until we get to a time when we've been disenfranchised and disillusioned so many times that we realize this thing of political parties doesn't work. We haven't gotten there yet. We will still be going along those lines. That is why even now you see, like with the last elections, more and more ethnically inclined political parties have come up and people are rallying behind them. There are regions that haven't done that yet, but everyone is heading in that direction. Yes.
And then that's where the challenge is. Then you know what then happens? That takes away the issue of why you elect leaders. Because now you are so much blinded to a level that you don't question the leadership you have.
You don't, but if you look at the evolution of our politics, it's unfortunate that as a continent, our politics has always revolved around individuals, not political parties. And when you talk of the political party, it is the person who heads it really, around whom everything revolves. Yes. And the unfortunate thing with a country like ours, a lot of what we call development has always been tied in with the affiliation an individual has with that person who's at the helm of this ruling party. So we haven't gotten out of that thing out of our minds. And that is the reason why coalitions work, because people feel so long as we have our person in government,
then you are done.
Yeah, even if they're just a minister, we're okay. If we don't, then our goose is cooked. And that's why the drafters of our new constitution understood this and said, let's get away from this. So let's create counties. So you cannot say that everything has to emanate from the national government. You will have your own government in the locality that you come from. Now that government will look after you. Now, our lived experience is that our own governments are replicating exactly what the national government
if not worse, by the way.
And these are our people.
What has happened? The other day, I don't know, there was this survey which was done the other day. Was it last year?
Yes.
And on the counties.
Yes.
And it actually confirmed that some of the local economies of these counties have even worsened as compared to the earlier, where we had a centralized system. So which means leaders are marginalizing their own people.
They are.
For example, if I'm now the governor of Kitui, you realize that before I take Kitui, what happens is there's always a baseline survey which indicates where we are. Health matters, water matters, agriculture matters. And then after 5 years, you do such a survey, it might happen that even people are worse off in some of these key indicators. And that's why you see we are saying, I think as Kenyans, we might not really be able to do away with the fact that we are tribal, we are more regional, but with the time we need to think about the bigger issue of how do we develop our country. And the development will start at the counties because that's something we have to live with. Kenyans have said these are good.
Should that be with time, Mweshimiwa, or should it be now?
It should be now.
Because,
I mean, we know development does not come in a day.
Sure, but
it takes time, but then you need to put up the right building blocks. So that like now, we should be seeing a situation where out of the 47 counties, we see a situation where year out we see more cases of corruption, reported corruption cases. We see more cases of people now where the health indicators starting to give positive, so that with the time, then we can say we are now on the right trajectory in terms of positive. And if that happens, then because development cannot happen in a day, we can say in another 15 years to come, will be better. And that's why you see, even these counties which got good pioneer governors. Now we have done 10 years of devolution. Counties which got good pioneer governors. This third level of now, the third period of governance, what has happened is they were able to put up some very good foundations for their counties. And those who are coming now are actually just building on those foundations. There are others which started on the wrong footing. And instead of now starting zero, going positive, they are already at negative. So the second cycle of governors who have taken after 10 years are actually now working on the negatives to bring it to zero before they start going positive.
Yeah, and that's going to take a lot of time.
And that is going to take a lot of time. And that now this is all about leadership.
Unfortunately, Mweshimiwa, that even the premise on which we started this conversation today, for me, usually mirrors a smoke screen.
Yes.
Whereby there are conversations that are thrown onto the table, kind of like a dead cat strategy, so that all of us are looking at this thing and everybody's talking about term limits, extended term limits, whereby there are things that are going on in the country for which if a little bit of effort was being put towards, we would be able to fix. I mean, there's a list. I don't even know where we can start. Are we looking at the health situation?
It's a long list.
Are we looking at the cost of living, which is something that it's been in our mouth, but it is actually hitting us in the face today with the rising cost of fuel, with the rising cost of food and transport, with the fact that people cannot put their children in school, that people today have children at school, at home today because they cannot go to school, that people go to hospitals, cannot get drugs. Those are the issues that are not being addressed. But here we are talking about extending a term limit for something that it doesn't matter So how are we going to be able to remove our minds from the political drive of the day and focus on the matters that matter?
Actually, I can't agree more. You know what? You put it into context. The issue is, and I think the big question is, where we are as a country, is this time the right time to discuss extension of presidential term, or is this the time to discuss issues which are of concern to Kenyans on day-to-day basis? And you agree with me, we should be discussing about what we have put on the table. The issues of cost of living, issues of health, issues of education, issues of water, issues of economic empowerment of our people. These are the issues we should be discussing. But you can see somebody from nowhere has already pushed all our attention to an issue which to me I think should be an issue. Because on a serious note, the current regime has 5 years to govern. They have only done one. So they have 4 years. Why are we even discussing the extension of an additional 2 years to make it 7 when they have already done one? This debate would have possibly come after the 3rd year or the 4th year or even the 5th year when now we are approaching the elections. So that for now, we focus so much on the promises we give to Kenyans and focus so much on the issue of cost of living. Well, the other day I was watching some clip on telly, and I think it was a former MP, Honorable Katel, who was talking somewhere in Kericho, where he was saying, show me a petrol station where I will go as an opposition member or an Azimio member to go and fuel my car, and show me a petrol station where I will go as a Kenya Kwanza member to go and fuel my car. At the end of the day, it boils down to the fact that we are all fueling from the same petrol station. So whether you're in government or not in government, the issue of fuel prices is biting across the board. It is biting when you fuel your car. And what has happened, and people might not realize this, I've been in this debate for many, I think I've done more than 100 sessions on this debate of cost of living as an economist. I've been invited to so many radio stations, to so many TV stations. And what we keep on saying every day is that this matter of cost of living, unless it is resolved, it is not going to provide any room for another serious debate in this country. Because people always go around and they come back. You are telling us about this, our tummies are empty.
Okay.
We need to eat.
So let's take a break on that note, Mheshimiwa. But truth for me is that is what we actually should be having a conversation about today.
Exactly.
And the ways in which this ought to be fixed.
Yes.
That we have people who are in the legislature. We have people who are in county governments who've been put there by way of the vote.
Yes.
And there's actually something that they can do about this. Whether it's rallying up the executive, whatever it is, something can be done. And that's the conversation we ought to be having. And when we're looking at this issue that Kenyans are talking about, but the truth of the matter that is happening to Kenyans. And here we are with leadership that should actually be working on some of these matters. And we still seem to say that the situation is getting worse. What can be done as opposed to diverting attention? And I'm going to add something to that. We're looking at some things that are being done in government today. There are talks that are going on, bipartisan talks, which for the understanding of many Kenyans, the first item on the agenda was the high cost of living. We don't know where that is happening right now. Debt is through the roof in this country, and we were told that, borrowing will not happen again. But we're seeing an extension, if anything, of what was happening in a previous administration. We were also told that there will be no change to the constitution when it came to certain things in terms of governance and leadership. But those talks are already happening today. So how do we say that you will put your hope in a government, in an administration, which is extending what was happening in a previous one?
Quite a good question. And let's look at it this way. When we went to the campaigns, we had two main teams. We had what we call the Kenya Kwanza team, and we had the Azimio team. And each of these teams did promise many things to Kenyans. At the end of the day, it is the Kenya Kwanza team which has now the mandate to govern this country for the next 5 years. And basically, governance would mean for the next 5 years, they have been given that opportunity and the instruments of power to implement their manifesto. So the starting point would be what was in their manifesto. And I think you briefly have summarized their manifesto, where you say there was indication that they will not borrow more. There was indication that once we take power, we'll be able to look at the CBC program and see what amendments need to be done. Or if the worst comes to the worst, there was also a proposal that we could actually abolish it. You remember during their campaigns. There was a proposal that once we take up, we will make sure that, and many clips have gone out there where they were saying the price of fuel will definitely make sure it comes down. I remember one of the times the current president was saying people don't seem to understand that when you increase the price of fuel, it hurts the common mwananchi. So all those many things. So where we are today is looking at what is happening. Where are we and why are we there? The first question is the cost of living. The reason why the cost of living has gone up is we could put it into two categories. There is what I'll call the internal factors, which are localized. That is Kenyan problems. And there is the external. And anytime you listen to this government, they seem now to be hiding behind the external. But they are basic internal problems, to me, like more of a structural things that have not addressed. We have said this many times that one of the challenges we're having as a country, and I now want to talk as an economist, is that in any time you're doing a country's budget, you look at what we call the expenditure side of the budget, how much do you want to spend, and then based on that you look at where do we get the resources to do what we want to do. That is now the revenue side of the economy. The revenue side normally is through tax, which is locally generated income, and then you could go borrowing. So initially the talk was we will not borrow, we will see how to generate more revenue locally. You remember the issue of the finance bill. I think it took a lot of your time, me and debating, I'm sure. But where we have not gotten it right, from my point of view as an economist, is the expenditure side of the equation. That as a country, Kenya Kwanza has taken over the government. I don't know whether this is informed by the promises or is informed by just that urge to spend more, that the expenditure bit of it has really gone out of way. And you saw the other day the report by Controller of Budget, where he after 1 year, the report he tabled was now analyzing the expenditure for the last 1 year up to June 30th. And out of that, you could see the main expenditure items, mostly recurrent. And to make things worse, the highest expenditure was coming from the top office, the presidency, where the office of the president, the office of the deputy president, and the office of the prime minister,
prime secretary,
cabinet secretary.
Yes.
If you combine those three, I think we're talking about 20 billion in terms of recurrent. Look at the issue of public debt. As at 30th June, Parliament has only approved 10 trillion as a debt ceiling. There's a law which has come to Parliament which you are working on to amend now from a figure, a numerical figure, to a percentage, what they call the debt hunk, which is now 55%. But that bill has not yet become law.
But you all are working on it.
We are working on it, and as we are talking now, the bill is we have a stalemate, because if you have been following what is happening, we have already formed what we call a mediation committee. A mediation committee means Senate and the National Assembly cannot agree. So they have formed a team of about National Assembly 7, Senate will be 7, a team of 14 to come and sit and then look at this bill. Now, what will happen if the two teams don't agree? The bill dies a natural death. Now, if it dies a natural death, we go back to 10 trillion. As we are talking today, we are at 10.25 trillion.
Yes.
We overshot the limit.
We've already shot the limit set by the Parliament. So we are already operating outside the legal framework provided, which means currently somebody should be seated somewhere explaining why have you gone above this limit.
Isn't that somebody Parliament?
That should be somebody in Parliament. Treasury should now be coming to Parliament. We have been on recess. But I imagine this week or the other week, we should be seeing Treasury being summoned by Parliament. I happen to sit in that committee so that they explain to the Parliament why you've overshot by about 250 billion. But now what is very, very, very worrying is the fact that we are overshooting this ceiling when the government, which promised that we will not borrow more, is in power.
I'm going to take a stab at Parliament as the legislature here and ask a few questions.
Yes.
Let's look at the scenario.
Yes.
The high cost of living today, even before the rising of taxes, was an issue, right? And Kenyans are saying, look, it's getting really expensive to survive, right? So the highest expenditure on revenue today is payment of debt.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact,
that's true.
It's the first thing that goes out, and it's the highest in terms of percentage.
Sure.
Thereafter is recurrent expenditure, the very high wage bill that Kenya has in terms of responsibility on its shoulders, payment of state office and things like this. Now, to pay that debt, because, there's nowhere else where this money is coming from, there has to be an increase in taxes on Kenyans today. And the revenue that is being sought is not the revenue that is being brought, because there's just not enough. So the question is, there is no option, according to them, but to raise the amount of money that is brought in via tax. But still that money is not coming in because businesses are folding, individuals just don't have, they're not able to meet it. So one would hope that the robust question, recess or not, that's coming in from Parliament would be, how are we going to solve this problem? Asking, why is public debt through the roof? Asking, the money that was borrowed was supposed to be for development. Where is the development that's supposed to be happening? Those are the questions that we would hope would be asked on behalf of the people. But we don't hear that.
No, it's happening. I want just to take you back. You remember when COVID hit this country? What happened that time? Parliament, through the budget committee, because in Parliament we have the majority and the minority side. Procedurally, the majority side is supposed to be championing the interests of the government. So what would happen in such a situation is, during the COVID, the minority leader and the majority leader were able to, through the other committees of Parliament, were able to sit and say, where we were today, we need to come up with measures to cushion Kenyans, because people had lost jobs, nothing was happening in the economy. And you remember that time we came up with a special program where we reorganized the budget to push more resources to areas where you could cushion Kenyans. Now, what is required to be done? I don't think we are short of options, and we have said this in the past. One of the things we need to do, and we can give these options because they have been tested and they have worked. One of the things we could do currently, when things become very tough to the community, you could look at the budget purely, because the reason why we are borrowing is because we are on budget deficit. The kind of money we are collecting is not enough to finance our budget. So there are two ways, and that's what I was saying, we need to look at the expenditure side of the budget. In areas where we have programs which we think we could either reschedule them to be done in the future, or we could scale them down for purposes of being done in phases, so that we wanted to spend 100 billion on a matter today, we can say for this year let's spend 50, and then you have that space to do other things. The other thing you can also do, in terms of taxation, there are things you can do, and we have said this many times. Currently, where we are today, in terms of taxation, there's the theory, the economic theory, which says there's a level you tax people up to. If you go beyond that, you collect less.
It's called diminishing returns.
We normally call it RAVE theory. So it's a curve, which once you get that, the total collections will always come down. What happens normally is, currently where we are today, and I've seen it happening, when you overtax people, there are two things which happen. One of them is they are likely to change their consumer behavior. For example...
Or they're guaranteed to change their consumer behavior.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So what happens is, when you're expecting to collect money, the people will change their behavior. If they change their behavior, then you will not collect that money. For example, what I've seen, and I've just been driving as I came here, you realize that now there are more Kenyans walking to work now, as opposed to using matatu or using private cars. What does that mean? The fuel you added from 8% to 16%, owing the volume to be drawn remains the same, definitely will go down. Because if I parked my car, and I'm no longer using my car, I'm now on a matatu, automatically it means the fuel I've been drawing, I will not draw it. So the tax component of that fuel disappears. So over time, that's the growth. The other thing, what happens is businesses will reorganize their mondos.
Indeed.
Now, once businesses reorganize their mondos, then you are also likely not to collect as much as you expected. And the worst bit of it, now the worst, is when taxes become very high, people revert to tax avoidance. So that if it's a company like where we are today, you could think of about having two payrolls. You have a payroll for the taxman, and you have a payroll for the company. Now, this is the worst bit, because people come up with very innovative ways of making sure they don't pay tax. So even when you are imagining that you'll be collecting more, you collect less.
Indeed. Weshimia, will we hear questions about where the supposed development expenditure went? Because it's extremely important here.
No, it is.
Because the law states, and we know this, the law states that you borrow, you're borrowing for development. Now, if you cannot see requisite development projects in the country that equal to the amount of money that came in, then there's a problem. And the only people who can ask the question today and ask for investigations into what exactly happened to be made public, again,
is members of parliament.
Is Bunge.
You're right.
So when will we hear these questions being asked? Because if they're not asked...
Actually, we must also... Let's give it to parliament also, because as I said, I've been there, this is my third term. The first and second term I've served in parliament, we didn't have really a committee looking purely on matters public debt. This 13th parliament, because of the issue of public debt becoming a very big issue in this country, Parliament now has come up with a committee called Public Debt and Privatization Committee, which now the committee is purely looking at matters public debt and issues of consolidated fund, the withdrawal from the consolidated fund. And I can tell you, up to now, that committee has tabled about 5 reports. And when you look at those 5 reports, it will be very interesting to discover what has been happening with our public debt. Some of the things which can be explained. For example, now, this country, for the last almost over 10 years, we have been paying something called commitment fee. Commitment fee is when you sign a loan and you don't draw the loan. So there are loans we have signed for the last over 10 years. We signed it for as a country. We have not been drawing those loans. And every year we are paying about not less than 500 million.
But why have we not drawn?
Commitment fee.
Why have we not drawn down?
Now, this is another question this committee has started now asking. Because you realize anytime you talk to Treasury, ask them what is happening, they will tell you, the department is not able to give us information. But now this committee is now on top of that. The other thing you'll be surprised is, in terms of loans, there are loans which have been taken in this country, because this is public knowledge, and you can't trace what this loan did. I want to give you an example. There's a loan which was in the papers, in the books. It says it was taken by Kenya Power, about 7.6 billion, taken by Kenya Power. Now, when we are discussing...
Was that guaranteed by the government?
Yeah, obvious. That was guaranteed by the government.
Right.
Now, this loan, in the books, says it is Kenya Power which took the loan, guaranteed by the government.
Yes.
Now, when you interact with the Auditor General, and the report is there, the Auditor General report says Kenya Power is not even aware about that law. So,
but in the books,
what now this committee has done, the committee has made a recommendation instructing the Auditor General to do a forensic audit of this loan, so that we know where did this loan go. So what we are saying in simple terms now, as we move to the future, if we want to help this country, let's get loans which are tied to specific programs and projects.
But these ones are supposedly tied to specific ones, but we can't see them.
When we take the loans, surely,
I mean,
the purpose for the loan is stated.
That's the thing.
Yes.
But now you know what has happened. For example, this one I've just mentioned. It tells you what? There's a very high likelihood that the money was diverted to other uses. The fact that you take a loan for city here, then you are the person guaranteeing the loan, but it doesn't reach here.
Yes.
So what has happened? In the meantime, something must have happened. So we are saying, let's now, anytime we get a loan, we have a system of knowing it is taken for you, and then we have a system to follow to make sure that it reaches you. And actually it's used for the intended purpose. And those are the gaps. The other gap which has been existing is that in terms of public debt, there's this issue of when you take a loan, the law allows something called sinking fund. The law, it is in our Public Finance Management Act.
Yeah.
That if you take a loan, can you, from the word go, have a sinking fund? Sinking fund is where your funds, so that by the time the loan matures,
Yes.
you have money to pay the loan.
Yes.
This fund, even though it's in our legal books,
We don't have.
it has never been operationalized. So those are the gaps we have now started to pick as Parliament, and we are saying if we want to streamline the issues of public debt in this country, then that's the direction to go. There is the issue of the foreign exchange, which we can't rule it out. You know, the dollar has gone crazy. So
It's not the dollar.
It's the shilling that has gone crazy.
I mean, it's the dollar.
The dollar is doing what it's doing.
No, the shilling and the dollar. I mean that exchange rate.
Yeah.
So basically, what we are saying is we also need to come up with very clear strategies. How do we manage our public the foreign exchange issues?
Would it help if the Treasury was removed, or was independent of the Ministry of Finance?
That's one of the problems that has been keeps on coming. But to me, I think even in countries where we have Treasury standalone and finance standalone, even though they could be in the book standalone, at the end of the day they work very closely because they are managing the public purse. So I think what we do just is for people who are managing these resources to be just truthful.
I don't think so, because if that is the case, then Parliament and the executive would be one thing, and we would say they will still play the part of being an oversight. No. The clear separations need to be there so that you can know who to hold accountable. Because if Treasury acts as a department of finance, my friend, the commingling and the intermingling will be so vast you will not even know where to begin.
I think what we can do is, because this is nothing new, it exists, I think people could we could do studies on the both.
Yes.
What are the merits of separation and what are the demerits of separation? Based on that, but that proposal keeps on coming.
Do you remember that this office, the Budget Control, was part
Controller,
of the
CBO, yeah.
It was part of the Auditor General's office at some point.
Yes.
Now, do you see the benefits of the separation?
Yes.
Yes.
Now they are more independent now.
Yes.
They can jack.
The very thinking that brought about the three arms of government is the same thinking that I'm proposing.
That you're proposing.
But let me ask you a question. This is something that has bothered my mind.
Yes.
Sometimes we blame the leadership needlessly. Why do I say this? We may be blaming them, but they're actually not able to do the things that we think they can do.
What do you mean? And they're the leaders?
No.
Okay.
Being a leader doesn't mean you can get elected.
Elaborate a bit.
What I mean is this. If somebody doesn't have the capacity to do something.
Okay. Capacity issue.
Yes.
Okay.
You can actually see them trying, but they never quite get there.
Exactly. That's right.
Because if they have capacity, then you see it. They actually do what they're supposed to do. You see it. But if someone is trying, but it isn't working, we can be saying, we have explained it and explained and explained it. It's the same thing I ask of the governors we've elected. Surely, sometimes perhaps you're expecting too much. This person probably can't do what the...
Yeah. Capacity. No, capacity is a statement of fact. When you talk about capacity, that's a statement of fact.
Yes.
You can't change it. Because as you say, there are situations where people have capacity and they can do things. There are situations where if you have no capacity, you don't have a capacity.
It doesn't matter how much you try.
And unless you get a way of enhancing the capacity, then automatically your hands are tied. And I think that's where most of and that is very close to what you were saying earlier. In a situation where you conduct your elections on the basis of region, tribal, or our person, then you're likely to get people who have no capacity. And once they sit there, then you have nothing else to do other than the 5 years where you realize that the capacity is not there, and then you change. That time is already gone.
Yeah.
You can't undo the clock.
I feel as though you just got here, Mweshimiwa, and our time is running out. But, very quickly, a wrap up from you. I feel that we should have this conversation every day until something is done about it. Until it's front and center for those who make the laws that, look, people are suffering today, not tomorrow. People are suffering today. And the sins of the past and those of the present are continuing to make an impact on how Kenyans live today. How should that conversation continue at your point of legislation, really quickly?
To me, I think all said and done, we can't say Parliament has been 100%. We also have our own challenges as Parliament. And we need to up our game as Parliament, because the oversight role is actually ours. We're the people who should be now pointing out these things, and where we think we need to change the law, we change it. But this also from my analysis, when you look at our governance architects, we have a bit of challenge which need to make. What has happened normally is, this idea of you have a majority lead party and a minority party, and the majority party is mostly composed of the people now in government.
Yes.
Also weakens the role of Parliament. Because there are situations where you find this matter makes a lot of sense, but then when it comes to Parliament, because of the party lines, people are whipped to go the party lines. Anytime you go party line, you lose objectivity.
Have a problem.
You lose objectivity. And I think that's a challenge we have as a country. So we need to think of a way of ensuring that Parliament, as you were saying earlier, is an institution which can make independent decisions with minimal influence from the executive.
Mheshimiwa Dr. Makali Mulu, thank you for being our guest this hour. Hope to talk to you again in the future.
Yeah, sure.
Asante sana.
God willing, will be here.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.